Hi friends, welcome back to Literature Guide. Today's video is about the two narrative devices, interior monologue and stream of consciousness technique. In the last video, we have seen the difference between dramatic monologue and interior monologue, but this video is related to interior monologue and stream of consciousness technique. Actually, these two terms have been used synonymously as if they are one and the same thing, but it is not so, because so many critics have expressed their views regarding these two terms. Some critics think that the stream of consciousness technique covers the interior monologue, and it is the part of the broader term stream of consciousness. Some critics think that the stream of consciousness technique also covers interior monologue and dramatic monologue, and the other critics think that interior monologue is a broader term than the stream of consciousness technique. We can say that they are the two sides of the same coin, and they are both narrative techniques employed by writers in order to express their views. Actually, it is not the writer who expresses his views, but the character and his inner thoughts, views, impressions, they have been expressed there as if they are overheard by somebody, and they are described in the work of art. I have tried to express all the features related to interior monologue and stream of consciousness in this particular video. Let's dive into the video and find out whether this video is really of any worth or value for you or not. Let's dive into it.
Interior monologue and stream of consciousness. The literary terms interior monologue and stream of consciousness are chiefly associated with the narrative methods in poetry and fiction. They are the two narrative methods employed, especially by the modernist writers. Though these two terms are often used synonymously, they differ from each other. The term interior monologue first appeared in Valerie Larbor's essay on James Joyce. First of all, interior monologue is a narrative technique for presenting a subject matter, while stream of consciousness, in a psychological sense, is the subject matter. Secondly, an interior monologue, in literary sense, reflects a character's thoughts directly. The author tries to stay aloof as a narrator, commentator or describer of events and the story. The character's thoughts are not mixed up with sense perceptions and impressions. The reader can find the observance of the rules of grammar, word order, and syntax to some extent in the interior monologue. In the stream of consciousness technique, the character's thoughts may be mingled with sense perceptions and impressions. The readers can find that the grammatical rules, syntax, and punctuation marks are not strictly observed in the stream of consciousness narrative. According to the Oxford Dictionary of Literary Terms, the stream of consciousness is the continuous flow of sense perceptions, thoughts, feelings and memories in the human mind. It is a literary method of representing all mental processes of the character. The mental processes and thoughts are usually presented in an unpunctuated and disjointed form of interior monologue. Thus, the subject matter of the stream of consciousness can be presented through the interior monologue. This clearly implies that interior monologue is one of the methods of the stream of consciousness technique. It is important to note that the term stream of consciousness technique has been introduced to literature by May Sinclair from Psychology. The term was employed by William James in his book Principles of Psychology. The Oxford Dictionary of Literary Terms defines the term interior monologue as the written representation of a character's inner thoughts, impressions and memories as if directly overheard with the intervention of a summarizing and selecting narrator. It is important to note that there is disagreement among the critics about the relationship between interior monologue and stream of consciousness technique. Some critics think that the interior monologue is one of the narrative techniques of stream of consciousness narrative. It is one of many techniques employed by the writer for narration. The other critics, on the other hand, stated that the interior monologue is a broader term, which encompasses all types of self-revelation, and expressions including dramatic monologue. It is important to note that the dramatic monologue is a representation of spoken thoughts of a character, whereas the interior monologue represents unspoken thoughts and impressions of the character. The two great Victorian poets Robert Browning and Alfred Lord Tennyson laid the foundation for the modernist writers. Robert Browning's poem Soliloquy of the Spanish Cloister can be deemed as an early example of an interior monologue. The French symbolist poets derived inspiration from the two great Victorian poets. They made adroit use of interior monologues through their verses. The poets Jules Laforgue, Stéphane Mallarmé, Arthur Rimbaud, and Paul Valéry produced some fine interior monologues. It is important to note that the French symbolist poets influenced the modernist writers like Dorothy Richardson, James Joyce, Virginia Woolf, Henry James, and William Faulkner to great extent. Dorothy Richardson has been deemed as the pioneer of stream of consciousness technique. In her famous autobiographical work Pilgrimage, Dorothy Richardson has dexterously employed stream of consciousness technique. The mental responses and impressions of the protagonist Miriam have been conveyed through interior monologues. Similarly, Virginia Woolf in her novel, The Waves has introduced the characters through the broken interior monologues. She has also employed this narrative technique in her novels To the Lighthouse and Mrs. Dalloway. James Joyce in his famous novel Ulysses made use of stream of consciousness technique to record the impressions and sense perception of Molly Bloom. There is a fine interior monologue at the end of the novel. Henry James has employed stream of consciousness technique in his famous novel Portrait of a Lady. The thoughts and impressions of the protagonist, Isabel, have been skillfully conveyed through stream of consciousness technique. It is important to note that William Faulkner employed interior monologues in his novel The Sound and the Fury. The fine use of interior monologues can also be found in the writings of Samuel Richardson and Ernest Hemingway. In poetry, Thomas Stearns Eliot, William Butler Yeats and Ezra Pound along with the other avant-garde poets adroitly used interior monologues. In his poem, Gerontian 1919, Thomas Stearns Eliot has recorded the impressions and thoughts of the old man Gerontian with the assistance of interior monologue. What passes through Gerontian's consciousness is the substance of the poem. Dr. Leavis remarked, "The poem has neither narrative nor a logical continuity, and the only theatre in which the characters come together, or could, is the mind of the old man, Gerontian." William Butler Yeats employed interior monologue method in his famous Crazy Jane poems. There is a fine interplay of interior monologues. The great poet, Ezra Pound, used the interior monologue technique in his famous work Cantos. Thus, the stream of consciousness and interior monologue are the two narrative methods employed exclusively by the modern writers. They chose different ways of narration and broke up the continuity of narrative by using these narrative methods. They discarded the age-old, conventional and standard ways of representing characters' views. They also violated the traditional syntax and coherence of narrative language by employing stream of consciousness and interior monologue techniques.
If you find this video of any value, please express your views in the comment box and like and subscribe Literature Guide. I have already made some videos on many literary terms in English literature. The last video is a fine example of that, which is on dramatic monologue and interior monologue. I have covered many topics regarding literary terms, drama, poetry in this particular channel. If you want to watch them, just visit the channel and you will find a lot of videos there. Some of them are really very important for the NET and SET examinations. The students will find them very valuable if they watch the videos minutely. I will meet you again after a few days with an interesting topic. Till then, bye.
Please subscribe Literature Guide.